Oh, ho, ho. And here we are. So we'll see how that turns out, but welcome to the PACtrospective. And that's, I think, a great way to start it off with this massive, massive orchestration with all these great pictures taken by Ashley Smith of the Sea Voyage, leading us to talk to the captain of the Sea Voyage, my old buddy and partner in crime here, Mr. Daniel Clark, Esquire Hodge. How are you, buddy?
I'm hanging in, baby. How you doing?
Good, good, good. So so you're hanging out right now down there in New Mexico, correct?
Yep. I've been down in New Mexico since uh, mid to late March.
Okay. Life's
Yeah.
treating you well down there?
Can't complain.
Okay.
I've been hiking most days. I've been getting a lot of riding done. I've been hanging out with my cat, which is the only other living creature that I've seen in 6 weeks. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
So here we are. So we're launching the PACtrospective, and we're gonna be doing this throughout the summertime, going back through the season, celebrating the 10 years that we've been a theater company here in Philadelphia, and so we're working our way backwards. So we're starting with the Sea Voyage. So I'm gonna pose this question to you, which is the title of this whole thing. So why? Why the Sea Voyage?
You know, I think there's a lot to be said for something that's just a good time. That's certainly something that was very present. Particularly, like we tend to think of classical theater as like homework or like school or something like that. Where it has all this kind of like highfalutin value, where we have to really examine the human condition. I think that's definitely part of it, but we tend to forget that during the time when these plays were being produced in Shakespeare and in the time that followed, it was popular entertainment. So sometimes you weren't going to watch Othello or King Lear and come away edified. Sometimes you were just going to have a romp, the same way that you would go to watch a superhero movie now or whatever. And so there's this whole canon of adventure plays, sea voyage plays. And this one is called The Sea Voyage, which is kind of hilarious because it was a whole genre. It would be like, it's the equivalent of going to see a movie called Gladiator. Which won an Oscar, by the way, for those of you who haven't been paying attention. So there was something about doing something that was fun, and beyond that, a rarity for plays from the classical canon. It had like 7 or 8 roles for women, as opposed to the typical like 3 or 4, because of course all the women's roles were played by men and all that stuff. So to have a play that was like actually just a band of like warrior women as kind of like central to the plot, how can you go wrong?
So you got the play. So how did you get involved with bringing it over to the Seaport Museum?
Well, I mean, that has something to do with you, actually, you devil. We've done a couple of things in alongside the Seaport Museum in the past. We did the sea plays on the Gazella, and while the Seaport Museum doesn't own or have proprietorship of the Gazella, like there's a lot of crossover between like the two organizations. So we met a bunch of those folks. And then more recently, we did Iphigenia et Aulis on board the Olympia. And we went over and had the meeting with them saying, we want to do this play on the ship or whatever. So when I knew that we wanted to do, that I was interested in doing this kind of ramshackle play about pirates and Amazonian warriors. I thought, well, where else are we going to do this? Somewhere down on the water. And of course, they had this theater that's like, proscenium, where you can actually sit down and watch a play and it looks like a play. And we're talking to them about that. And I'm trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to make it not a proscenium show in that space. And John, the wonderful guy who runs the joint, goes, well, we've got this weird spot that's just the gallery. I says, what is this? And he goes, well, it's this kind of raw space, and it's got a bank of windows just facing the Delaware. And I said, take me to this room. And as soon as we stepped in, I knew it was kind of like the right spot for it. What an opportunity to do something where you can actually just be watching the water. And the thing that it gave the show in a way that I thought was really interesting is we had a whole second audience, because it's September, it's the Fringe, it's still pretty out, and there are people just walking up and down the river, and they're looking through the windows and seeing this show. And I think on closing night, we had a packed house, and then like you couldn't see the water for the end sword fight, because there was just this complete crowd of people huddled around the windows watching from the other side.
Can you talk about like maybe the one or two things that were specific that you brought to this show? Because you can go see there are some, I know like the Shakespeare Company down in Virginia, they did a production of the SEA Voyage years ago. But what was particular that you feel like you brought to the show, either yourself or something that was discovered with your cast that made it really special?
The cast was excellent wall to wall, and something that I think we really invested in as a group is trying to make sure that while each of the characters was funny, they also had their own truth and their own integrity. I love the American Shakespeare Center. I had a friend that used to work there, and I didn't see their production, but I think there's something about the way that we navigated it, that it was, that it had a lot to do with just making sure that everybody in the room was like high contact, and I'm going through this moment as a director where I'm really interested in like stripping things away. I think back, we're looking at our 10-year history. I think back to the Duchess of Malfi, where we didn't have anything, but per force, you know what I mean? We didn't have any money. So we just like got some actors together, and we got a chair, and we got a room, and we got some clothes, and we kind of turned people loose. And I've been experiencing a moment where I'm returning to that aesthetic, where I'm saying, so what's the least that we can have to make this show happen? And it's been interesting because the audiences really respond to it, like that kind of high impact, like what if we just had actors in a play, And I think because of this particular like moment that I'm going through, this thing that I'm exploring, you kind of strip away anything that is like artifice, or anything that is any of the like directorial conceit stuff that gets in the way. You just kind of part the waters and say, what if we had good actors who invested in their characters to make them as human and complicated and funny as possible, and then we put the audience right on top of it.
I want to talk about like two specific things, possibly. Like what was the biggest challenge of trying to do this show in that space?
It's a weird space. It's wildly atypical. It's not anywhere that you would ever perform a play. They use it as a cafe. I mean, I've now done 2 plays in that room, but because there's this bank of windows and people can just kind of look in and do whatever, like there's no privacy to it. When you're rehearsing or when you're performing, like you're just kind of open to the universe, which is really complicated and not something that contemporary actors or audiences are used to. You might go see a concert like that, but you're not going to go see a play where you have to have like a specific kind of focus. And I think wrestling that play into a shape that is navigable for a contemporary audience is hard, because the play itself makes sense in the grand scheme of things, but it's like, is it one island? Is it 2 islands? Is it just the one island divided by a river? Like it's impossible. Like the geography of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
So you really had to lean into we had to make it as much of an adventure as possible. Ably assisted by the fantastic choreography of Eli Lynn, who constructed some of the best fights I've ever had in any show that I've done. I mean, really leaning into the kind of piratical, swashbuckly, comedic fun of it. like
They
letting a
were,
fight
yeah.
happen that has a joke in the middle, you know.
Yeah, I mean the fights in the show were great. If we're looking for a video of the fights, so we're hoping to share one later on because they're hilarious and they're so inventive and just
Beautiful.
so much fun. Uh, and then the one other thing I wanted to ask you was, what was the greatest surprise of working on the play?
Um, that's a great question. I think the thing that surprised, we all went into it knowing that it was going to be fun
Right.
and knowing that it was going to be funny and that we were really just going to lean into this kind of like haphazard thing. And I think the biggest surprise was how moving parts of it were, because there's this love triangle in the middle of the story, and there's these questions of duty and where do you belong and what are you willing to sacrifice in order to have another's happiness. So there were these moments kind of peppered throughout this adventure play that were startling in their sincerity and in their emotional weight and the pithiness of it. Like, for example, I mean, something that you wouldn't think of, but you've got Stephanie's character, Aminta, has been separated from her sibling, who is the captain of another vessel, played by Eli Lynn. And the moment when those two are reconnected at the end of the play, I mean, it's almost the climax of the play, was like startlingly like arresting. And more so than that, my favorite like surprise moment in the entire show. So we had this wonderful woman playing the head of the Amazonian women, and she's a native Spanish speaker, and she just was doing banner work for the entire show. And her long lost husband, it turns out, is Nathan Foley, who is one of the greatest criminals to ever work in the American theater. And at the end, they are reunited. Like, there's this reunion between the two of them. She's thought he's been dead for however long, and I think at the final dress, like, he sees her for the first time, and God bless Nathan, he had written for himself a speech in Spanish that didn't appear in the original play. And he looks at her covered in dirt, and he stands up and he just apologizes to her in her native tongue for being gone for so long and for the way that he looked and the misery of his state. And everybody, like, waterworks across the board. Like, I was crying, she was crying, the entire cast was crying. And it was like, for the entire run, it was one of the most impactful moments in the entire show, because Nathan Foley likes to sneak things in at the last minute.
Dan Hodge, is there anything else you want to add about the experience of Sea Voyage?
It's hard to really encapsulate something like that. I guess the only thing that I would add, or that I would like to speak to, is each project has its own surprises and its own weight, and brings its own kind of identity, and has a lot to do with shaping the way that I, as an artist, like to work. So the Sea Voyage was kind of like a flashpoint in this renaissance that I'm having as an artist and as a director, and as a way that I like to think about plays. And the same way that I hope a project changes an audience, I'm always surprised by the way the projects change me.
So, Dan, I just want to say thank you for joining us. This is the first one that we're doing here, so I'm experimenting with some different things. One of the things that I wanted to do was have like a little postcard of the show to show off the art, and I don't have that with me right now. And I had them. They're all over the place. I had them, but I'll show it later on. But I'm gonna end us with our new theme music over here, and play that as we go out here. Has nothing to do with the show whatsoever.
Like, what is it, the printer starting up?
What's that?
It sounds like a printer starting up.
Well, Dan Hodge, thanks for joining us. And I know we're going to see you again because you did a lot of stuff with the PAC, because you're the co-founding artistic director. So, signing off from Philadelphia and New Mexico, I'm Damon Benetti, also a co-founder of the PAC, and we'll see you all really soon.